Hey, welcome to Fathering Our Future, the podcast for dads. I'm Anthony Vandegrift, and I'm not the perfect dad, but every day I am trying to be better. I'm super excited about today's episode because I have a very special guest with me today. He is a husband, a father, and an exceptional singer, songwriter, and musician. He's a worship leader, a worship pastor, but most importantly to me, he's a good friend of mine. I'm super excited to have Draylin Young with me today on Fathering Our Future. Well, Draylin, thanks so much for being with me, buddy.
Man, I am so honored to be on Fathering Our Future. This is really cool. I'm
well,
glad
thank
you're
you.
doing this.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. You're a big shot now. It's hard to get you, but before we get into your story, I do have to say something. I want you to make sure that you actually share this portion with your wife because it's going to get you some brownie points. For everyone listening out there, Draylin and I had previously arranged to record this episode a few hours earlier today, and he called me about a half hour before we were supposed to start, and he said, "Hey, buddy, I am getting home late, and I need to give more time to my wife." And I was just like, respect, man. That is so good, keeping your priorities in your proper place. You make sure your wife hears that.
Yes.
And just for the sake of everyone,
Thank you.
Draylin did not pay me to
Not
say
yet.
that. He has not bribed me. He can make a donation at fatheringourfuture.com if he wants to, but I'm not going to pressure him to do that. I'm not going to tell him that you go to fatheringourfuture.com, you make a donation. But all joking aside, I do have to say that I am super proud of you because we went to high school together for a little bit. We went to church together. I know who you used to be and who you once were, and I see who you are now and where you're at in life now. And it's been a magnificent transformation. I'm really looking forward to the next chapters of your life. But like I said, you're big time now. Everyone knows who Draylin Young is, but for the few people listening who might not know, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, let me first say, you're not missing much. Number one, if you don't know who I am. But like Anthony said, we had the privilege of going to high school together. Anthony's a little bit older than I am, so I think you were a senior when I came in as a freshman. So
I think so.
Or actually, no, I came in as a sophomore, and you were a senior. So
you illegally played basketball with us your freshman year.
I did. Me and George, dude.
We were great until we got to the finals, and they were like, "Hey, these two guys can actually play in the team." Then they were screwed at that point. But
then we got kicked
it was
off,
fun.
So, but my name is Draylin Young. I am a husband to Kelsey. I am a father to Elisha and Everly, and we all are worship pastors here in Sterling Heights, Michigan. It's a suburb, probably about 45 minutes north of Detroit. And we've been here for about 8 years, and which before that I attended Indiana Bible College where I met my wife, and before that I grew up in Dallas, Texas, and me and Anthony know each other very well. We went to the same church, North Cities, UPC Church, and as Pastor D.G. Hargrove, incredible man of God, and we were in the youth group together. We went to the Christian school together, played basketball together, went on camps, and it's really cool to see, you as a dad and you as a husband, and man, it's just really cool to see just great men of God. Like you said, you get to see the whole story, and just from what we've been able to be a part of each other's life. I will credit this something to Anthony Vandegrift that he probably will only say to certain people, but let me say it like on your show. I credit a lot of my musical palette to Anthony Vandegrift's playlists. Okay, if anybody knows, like, if you are from North City's Christian Academy School, like, I thank God every day for Anthony Vandegrift and George Chuma, because those guys like wrote the playlists of the school, number one, number two, the church, the youth group, and like all these people. It's so funny. Like, I tell people all the time, I'm like, you guys don't know who Mark Broussard is? Like, and I just like, I love having that step on people. Like, let me show you this.
You get to do what I used to do to people.
And it's like,
oh, you don't know David Ryan Harris?
You know David Ryan? You don't know who Gavin DeGraw? Like, oh my goodness! Like, come on.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and a lot of and we're not talking about this, but and it's gonna be a kind of a long episode, bro. Unless you just want to cut it off, because like, bro, we
You do your
first of
thing,
all,
man.
we haven't like talked in a long time, and
I know.
so we're like catching up and doing a podcast right now. Um, but man, seriously, like I think of all that music that I, have listened to, songs that, back then, like we didn't have like Spotify, like where it just generates you playlists and stuff. Like you had to like hear about somebody's record and like, you know, oh, let me borrow the CD and like download it on my computer and then put it on my iPod and then let me listen to it on this 2 hour trip to church. Like, like that's what it was. It's just not that way now. But man, it was like a lot of the musical palette that I pull from now, my taste, like
Yeah.
type of stuff comes from that eclectic, group of music, So Anthony Vandegrift is if we had like church DJs, like he'd be the GOAT.
It's funny you say that I contributed so much to your
You
musical
did.
inspiration and ability,
You
because
did.
I don't get a royalty from any of
You
your
don't.
stuff, which is
You
kind of
don't.
funny.
And I'm really so glad that you don't, because you would get a lot of single dollars.
Yeah. But it is really funny that you say that, because the more that I have listened to you, the more I have heard artists like David Ryan Harris. Like I can tell like you're taking some of
Yes,
the like tonality and some of the movements, and I'm like, you put that in a song about Jesus. I see what you
I
did.
did. Yes.
Like I catch it. I won't tell anybody. They have to listen to the podcast to figure that out.
Yes.
But um, yeah, it's a lot of fun. And I mean, we haven't talked in a long time. You're right on that. That's part of the reason why every time you come to North Cities, I decline, so that you have to have David McGree on the keys and you don't get to have me.
Man,
Just trying to stick it
we
to you
we
right
need
there.
we need you, bro. We need
I
you.
know. Just talk to me more and I'll be there for you.
All right,
Okay.
cool.
That's all you got to do.
I'll
It's all
make
you
it.
got to do.
I'll
But
I'll be in Houston this week. You gonna come?
okay. Well, no, I'm not going to be there, but I'll be there in spirit.
Yes.
But like you said, man, geez, you got 2 kids now, which is just hard to
Yeah.
comprehend or wrap my head around. You've been married. How long have you and Kelsey been married now?
We got married February 20th, 2016. So
Nice.
seven
Yep.
years. Yep, about 7 years. We
Yep.
just celebrated 7 years, and we'll be at 8
Yeah, that's awesome.
next time. So
Congratulations
yes.
on that. It's big accomplishment. And, you left out some of the cool details that I'll tell. You're, like you said, you're, full-time worship leader, worship pastor.
Mm-hmm.
But in addition to that, you are songwriter, singer, you're a musician. You tour all the time. You're always traveling. You're doing a lot.
Yeah.
And it's actually commendable that you're able to do so much. And like I mentioned at the very beginning of this episode, you're still willing to kind of put your foot down when you need to, in a sense, and say, my wife needs some more time from me.
Yeah.
Like I got to keep my priorities in the right place. That in and of itself is a great lesson that any husband listening to this episode can take. Like, it's okay from time to time to say no. It's okay from time to time to cancel your previous arrangements if it's for the benefit of your family.
Yeah.
So,
and
again, I'm gonna throw that
I'll
in there.
say that I am not the best at it. It is something that I'm really working on. I think, you know, and one of the times, you know, man, sometimes you learn stuff. You either learn. I heard this from some really great man of God said you either learn from mistakes or mentors, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
a great way of saying like either you're gonna have to go through something traumatic for you to learn these lessons, or you can ask great
Right.
men of God or people that have gone before you and learn from their mistakes. But there are
Yep.
some things I think that the Lord wants you to learn, in terms of from
Sure.
experience. And for me, like you said, I mentioned this a little bit earlier. Something that people forget about me is like obviously my first calling is to be a husband and a father, and obviously a Christian. But um, then in terms of like the order of what I do, is we're worship pastors, at this church, and That's our heart. That, our heart is, local church, investing in our local church, our local assembly, our students, our, elderly, everybody, married couples, young married couples. That's just what I know that God has called us to do. But it's just not the extent of what He's called us to do. Obviously, with, songwriting and leading worship and empowering other churches and other worship leaders, something that the Lord has graced us to be able to do, and He has given us the capacity to be able to do those things. But we have to be better stewards of our time and stewards of our body, energy, our money, all of those things. And I will be the first to say that I don't get it right every time. But I had an experience where, so we travel a lot. Like I told you earlier, I have basically three full-time jobs. Number one, I'm a worship pastor for church. Number two, I am an artist, like a worship artist, like we travel and do all those things. Um, but also, we travel. I travel almost like a musical evangelist, so it's kind of like you go to churches and help their teams, you go to churches and, do worship nights and stuff like that. And then you have the artist side, I put in quotations, is, the touring and the recording and the, you know, uh, you know, producing records and stuff like that. Like it takes a lot of your time. And on top of all those things, I'm a father and I'm a husband. And, just like all those little pockets of timing where I'm on the phone with a pastor, I'm on the phone with somebody, or like, man, I'm on the phone a lot. And I remember just doing all this stuff. And I remember we were in Louisiana, and I was with my wife. We're in the car, and we were getting out of a restaurant, or we're going into a restaurant to meet with the pastor and his wife, and we're there for an event. And luckily, my family is able to travel with me quite a bit. That's something that I really push whenever I go places, almost to the point to where, if somebody's asking me to come somewhere and my wife can't come, then I'll just say I can't go. Because
That's
it's like
good.
it's a very important thing to me. My kids, like I, I want my son to come with me. I want him to be there with us, like, us just being together. He's traveled. It's funny, like I think we've paid for like more vacation stuff with his points from traveling with us, than like so many other things, because well, man, he's gonna come with us. It's very important.
Yeah.
But I remember us being out in the car and we were walking into this place, and before, she was kind of really feeling sad that, we hadn't had that real closeness in a while, because you just get so busy. And I just think the world of my wife. I'm like, man, she's awesome. Like, she can do this, she can do that. In terms of like the ministry side of what we do, she's such a big help. She does so many things that people have no idea. She writes half of these songs that people give me credit for, and she makes all social media posts and all this stuff. And I remember her looking at me with tears in her eyes, saying, you know, Dave, I do a lot for you. The only thing that I really want to make sure that we do is we have family day, you know. And I mean, I was stunned. I mean, I was like, well, we're doing this together, like we're spending time, like, and I just realized that my wife had asked me to take serious, to cherishly guard our time together on Friday, you know, like with tears in her eyes, because she grew up with a mom and a dad, that they did things together. They played games. They went
Mm.
to Starbucks and played card games and spent time and had family vacations. And me, I just didn't grow up with that. It was, my my situation, it's not an excuse, but my mother was a drug addict, and um, we didn't do a lot of things together. We were in and out, living different places, homeless at times, and then finally I moved in with my grandfather and my uncle, and it's just they're all very manly man, like like we don't talk about our feelings, like we don't, what I'm saying, we don't do none of the stuff that mom is accredited
Hmm.
for. And it does show me, it was hard for me to see how a man is supposed to love a woman because we didn't have that in our home, like so it's just so easy for me to just go, 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 and, for me to
Yeah.
do this and that. All right, babe, we're going this, pack your stuff, we're flying to such and such. And, and that's a staple in my mind that happened last year. And at that time we had traveled to almost every state, in the US. And it took me that long of traveling 2.5, 3.5 years for my wife to say, like, listen, like, I really need that time with you. We need that time together. And now, family Friday family day is like my favorite day. Like it's like,
Yeah.
I said, babe, whatever you want to do, we've gone, and it's so cool because we actually had this whole month to like we traveled one time this last month, month of March. We did one thing in Dallas. We did NTYC, and I just did that by myself. She stayed here. It was just kind of a quick turnaround trip for like a couple days, and then I came back home. But usually my schedule's like I'm somewhere every week almost, and but I was able to be home for like 3 whole weeks, like no travel, and now it's getting ready to pick back up starting again this week, and then we're going to London next week, and then like that sort of stuff. But it was just so nice, bro, to just hang out, like stay at home and wake up in your own bed and, you know, be with your kids and, see
Yeah.
those milestones. Like, man, it's like you only get so many moments, and it's like, man, watching
Oh,
my
right.
son grow up, watching my baby girl grow up. It's just like, so it again, I say, I'm not the expert, but I am still learning. And while I'm learning, I'm like, man, some stuff, it's just not worth it. It's not worth it to lose.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you shared that. I mean, you're definitely not alone in the whole you're not the expert type thing. I start every podcast episode that I'm not the perfect dad, but every day I'm just trying to be
Right,
better. Like I'm looking to improve. I know I'm not perfect. I know I'll never attain that status because honestly, I don't think it
right,
exists. Like none of us will ever be the perfect
right,
dad. And it's kind of that way in life. Like we'll never reach a pinnacle. There's always room for growth. But I think it's really commendable. One, that you had a relationship either where it was already comfortable enough for her to
yeah,
express that, or she was just courageous enough to
right,
express it, but then that you heard it. Like that's a big thing because a lot of times, men, when we're doing what we want to be doing, I mean, you're doing what you
yeah,
love to do, right? Like you're musically talented and your voice is mediocre at best, but other people like it.
yes, noted.
But like, so you sing and you're a music, you sing and you're a musician and you get to travel and you get to write songs and people want you featured on their songs. I mean, you're doing a lot and you're doing what you're passionate about. For her to join you and for her to express
Yeah,
that, and then for you to, with what you hold dear, with your dreams and your aspirations, to say family's more important, and she's
absolutely.
right, and then to just change your priorities and set things like that, that's commendable, and it's something that we all need to work on. I, I love the part where you talked about how, if the family can't be with you, that it's almost a make it or break
Yeah,
it deal. You make very few exceptions
yes,
if your family can't be with you, and I think that's great. And you talked about your upbringing a little bit, and I think it's remarkable, and maybe we can go into it a little bit more. But like, okay, so you shared that your mom was a drug addict, that you were in and out, moving all the time, homeless at other times. You finally moved in with your uncle and your grandfather. What about your dad? Did you ever know your dad? Was he ever
yeah.
around?
I think me and my mom, we left my dad there. I mean, they weren't married, and again, this was all before we were a part of church or anything.
Sure,
And that portion of my life was kind of a blur. Like, just there's so many things that happened that I had no idea was going on. I didn't know my mom was on drugs until I was probably like 10 years old. Until I moved in with my grandfather and
gotcha,
my uncle, and my uncle straight up told me, he's like, Gerald, you need to know this. Like, your mom's a drug, like she deals with this. And when he said
gotcha,
that, it made me just think like, oh, that's why that happened, or that's why, moments I come home at, I'd wake up. Like I remember this one time I came home at, I was probably like 6 or 7 years old, And I went to private schools, private Christian schools when I was younger, a lot, like a big majority of my life, uh, in Plano, Texas. That's where we lived. We lived there for a long time. And, you know, I remember I came home, she was home, and we were just, chilling. And, I was watching cartoons or whatever, and I fell asleep. And, if you fall asleep at like 7 o'clock, you're gonna be up at like 4, 4 or 5 a.m. And I woke up at like 4 or something like that. And man, the whole house was pitch black. Like, you know, every light was off, everything. Like, I didn't know what was going like. And I woke up looking for my mom. I'm thinking she probably fell asleep on the couch or something. And like the whole house was empty. And I was so scared, man. Like, I was just like, I don't like,
Wow.
and I remember probably, I would say a few months before that, she always had my uncle. My uncle has always been a strong part of my life. Like, he's always been there. He bought my first guitar when I was 5. And
Mm,
and like, we didn't have any music background in our family, nothing. Like, he was like the eclectic music dude. Like, he listened to different type of music, and he always, took care of me. Really kind of been my father for a long time. And
sure.
she had me. I remember 3 months before that night happened, she had me like she had me learning and memorizing phone numbers, and it was his phone number was one of those numbers that I had meant that I remember. Uh, I think it was 972-267-7385. Like, I still remember the number, and I remembered that, and I called his number and called him over and over and over again, and he answered the phone. He said, "Hello, what's going on?" I said, "Hey, I'm at the house. I don't know where mom." He said, "You don't know where she's at?" I said, "No, I don't know where she's at." He said, "Okay." And it's like he just knew what was going on. Showed up, picked me up, and I stayed with him for a couple of days. And
Mm,
and like, when you're a kid, you just like don't know about that, and you just keep going on in your life. Like, you just kind of like, okay,
yeah.
But like, that's how bad it was. But we left my father when I was probably like 3 years old, and
Gotcha.
uh, never, never heard anything from him all the way up until I was probably out of college. And when I
Wow.
got out of college, I went to IBC. I reconnected with my half sister, um, that my dad was in a relationship before. My biological father was in a relationship before, and he had a daughter. And I remember being the ring bearer in her wedding when I was like 4.
Mm,
So she's like married, has kids and stuff. And we reconnected after, like, I had been, she had been seeing me sing and do music and stuff. And she had reached out like, "Hey, I'm your sister. I don't know." I was like, "Yeah, I remember, blah, blah, blah." We would talk. I invited her to come to church a couple of times. She came, brought her family. And so she was still connected to him. So she was like, "Hey, why don't you swing by? I was in town one time." She's like, "Why don't you swing by? I know Dad would love to see you, blah, blah, blah." So I went by and, saw him, shook his hand, kind of connected again a little bit. I'm probably 20, probably like 21 at this point. And I hadn't seen him since I was 3, and so there was no bad blood.
wow.
I wasn't like mad at him. I wasn't, upset with him, because, again, man, God just had this way of just like protecting protecting me, like, my whole life, like my
Sure.
mind, my emotional, a lot of people look back at those times and they're like super scarred, and they're just like so upset and so mad that such and such did this. And honestly, man, God just protected my mind away from that, to where
Yeah.
I never was like upset at him. I don't hold I never held any grudge, or, you know, even against my mom. I didn't.
Yeah.
It was just God just had this grace on me um, that I just couldn't explain. But at the same time, that grace is there, but you still have to deal with the lack of, the the person being there, or the lack of compassion or knowledge
Sure.
about the situation of how to be a parent.
Right.
So in that situation, I see myself learning as I go, And I'm just so thankful, man, for my wife, bro. I'm so thankful. And
Yeah.
I'll pause to say this. You know, you were talking about earlier. It's like, man, it's so cool that that your wife said something that she felt comfortable and that you heard her. But it's like, she felt comfortable because, we have an open relationship of open line of communication where we talk about
Right.
everything. And I love my wife, bro. Like, she is my favorite. I'm not just saying that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not just saying that for
Yeah.
do say that for like brownie points, like whatever. Like, I'm saying that like because, bro, like she's been and I've said this, multiple times to people. She's been the most consistent woman I've ever had in my life. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you think
Hmm.
about that, like, usually
Yeah.
the guy has a really close relationship with his mother, which is good. Like, you want that, like I want, like, my son is gonna have that with his mom. Like having those conversations about girls and about your emotions, and then dad comes in to help out and show you how to steward your mind and you know what I mean? Like, which is great,
Yeah.
but like, man, like she has been my rock. You know what I'm saying? She has been that to
Yeah.
me. And like, I'm just gonna pause to say, bro, it matters who you marry. Like, it
Oh yeah.
matters who you marry, bro. Like, that, my uncle would tell me all the time. He's like, Draylin, the most important decision that you will ever make in your life is to choose the relationship with Jesus Christ and how that looks in your life. And the very second and very close is who you marry. It makes the biggest difference in your life, and it's made all the difference in my life. And
Yeah.
it makes it, because of who I married, it makes it that much easier to hear what she says. It makes it that much easier to want to be a better husband, to be a better father. Uh,
Yeah.
so, man, I'm just so thankful.
I'm glad you mentioned that about the communication part. That's one of the big things that I try and push, communication.
Right,
So typically I'm talking about this from the perspective of a father to a child, but it applies with any relationship. Communication, when it's done right, it's open, it's
right,
transparent, it's
yeah,
vulnerable. You talk about anything and everything, you listen. And the thing about that is you have to be trusting when you communicate, when you're vulnerable and you communicate, because you offer up something that's
right,
sensitive and you're being vulnerable. They take that. And when they see that you're trusting, that typically gets reciprocated
right,
back to you. And so what communication does is it builds trust, and trust is the bedrock of relationship. So if you want to establish a relationship, you've got to have
right,
communication. And if you want to nurture and grow that relationship, you got to keep on talking to each other.
right,
So I, I love that. I love that you shared that and how that's such a crucial part of your
yeah,
relationship. But thinking about like your upbringing, you didn't really have the dad model to look after. It's great that you had your uncle as such a strong male role model in your life. Because, I mean, statistically, even without having a father, having a strong male role
yeah,
model in your life still sets you up to be pretty
yeah.
successful. And so I'm grateful that you had that, because he's a solid
Man,
guy.
I would be lost
Um,
without him, bro. Like, I'm serious, man.
yeah,
I would be lost without him. Like, he's the
yeah,
guy that brought us into church. God spoke to him. He was the prophet of our family. He is the guy that,
mm,
got us, like, kept us on, and you know, man, I love the music I love because of him. I'm serious about the things of God because of him. And, like, the cool thing about, not having your biological dad, like what you said, man, is and that's what the church is for, and that's what your family's for, is those role models, man. It
yeah.
makes or breaks you, and it made all the difference in my life. Seriously.
Yeah. Well, and it clearly did too, because I remember us growing up. I mean, we knew for the most part that you lived with your uncle. So we knew like there was some brokenness in the family. And at that young age, we didn't really ask questions. We were just
Right.
buddies. But it was always, really admirable or admirable of you, because you lived about 45 minutes away, but you always took the DART, the public
Yeah.
transportation that we have here in Dallas. And I mean, this took you like doubled the time at least.
Yeah.
You're at least looking at like an hour and a half commute to get from where you were to make it to school in
Yeah.
the morning, to make it to church on time. I mean, so clearly the passion that he had and the principles that he instilled, they soaked into you because you had commitment that probably no one else in our age group had. I mean, I lived across the street from the church for the longest time, and it's just like, dude, I'm tired. Like, I don't want to go, but like you were going to be there, and you were taking a bus, so it's just like, if Draylin's going to be there, it's like I've got zero excuse, right? It's like, come on.
Well, I
So,
will say,
but like clearly
I
that,
will say that a big part of that was, yes, he instilled a lot of, you know, consistency. Like, man, this is very important. And it wasn't so much that he was making me go, as much as, you know, as much as I wanted to, I wanted to get that affirmation from him as a father, figure in my
mm,
life. And I knew that he valued the things of God so much that I knew that I could get affirmation from him as well as God. And it was an influence thing, like it was just like,
yeah,
I knew that, but at the same time, it was like, it was just such a safe place for me to be able to grow and, you know, um, truly embrace that,
yeah,
so, but a lot of it had to
yeah,
went with the fact that, I didn't have any brothers or sisters, and I
yeah,
just longed for community with my friends, with the McGree brothers and with George and, I'm saying, with
yep,
you guys, with Brock, like everybody that was there. It was just, I mean, that was because when I went home, it was a 45-minute drive, hour and a half, you know, uh, train and bus ride home to just me and my grandpa and my uncle, and that's great, but it's just not fun. You know what I mean?
sure, yeah.
So, but no, man, that was a huge thing in my life for sure. So,
Yeah, well, I'm glad. I'm glad that you had him, and I'm glad that you got involved in church and that you stuck with it because, I mean, it's gotten you to where you are today. Clearly, um, let's switch here. Let me ask you this: at what point? I know you started singing with us and stuff when we were way back in the youth band and that fun stuff. But at what point in your life did you decide like that's what you wanted to do, like the singer songwriter? When was it when you were like, this is what I want to pursue in life?
well, I'll have to say that I that light went off to me when I was probably about 14, about 13, 14 age. I was obviously entering into church for the first time, and being in that weird space where you're changing, you're being discipled,
Yeah,
I'm going to the youth group, and I'm still hanging out with my friends in Lancaster, and I'm still watching stuff. I'm still listening to different types of music that I probably shouldn't be listening to, and watching stuff I shouldn't be watching. But now, and like, hey, I'm being thrown this opportunity of leading worship. Um, so my uncle comes home and he gives me like 5 CDs, and at the time we were listening to CD, that like a CD player with speakers and stuff, and he brings me 5 CDs. He brings a Preston Wood Choir CD. These are CDs that he's a hairdresser and a barber, so like his clients would bring him stuff. So he brought me these Christian CDs. They knew that he was a Christian, so they brought him CDs. First CD was Preston Wood Choir, which is a choir of a church in Dallas, huge church in Dallas. It was a Kurt Franklin Hero album. It was the J Moss Project album, and some other CD. And then there was this other CD that was like kind of like a hologram, almost a 2 disc CD, and and it said Israel and New Breed live from another level. And I turned the CD over to see see the back and see the list of the songs. I was like, oh wow, like they're singing "Friend of God." Like that was like, I was like, oh okay, like we sing that song at church. Like we sing it all the time. And I was like, okay, I turned it on, and I immediately noticed that they didn't sing the song the way that we sing it at our church. Like I was like, wow, like that's like a huge difference, you know?
wow, that's actually a good
Yeah,
song.
yeah. I was like, wow, like I didn't, like, wow. So then,
Yeah,
I
I'm with you.
heard that and I was like, man, and I started, listen to a little bit here and there, looked at a couple videos, And Vince Stegall, who's your cousin, who was a big mentor in my life,
Yep.
and that would just disciple me and spend a lot of times giving me books, and just a very strong leader in my life as well. Um, he loved Israel Houghton. Like, he was like, man, this dude is like the greatest worship leader of all time. Like, you need to like he literally, I remember him telling me, bro, you need to listen to everything that he's ever done. And I started listening, bro. And when you got a hour and a half, 2 hour commute, bro, like, you can get
Yeah.
through two albums like pretty easy. And man, I just got indulged, bro. Like, I was so moved by the music. I was so moved by the worship experiences that were happening. And then I would go home and watch him on YouTube. And man, I
Mm-hmm.
saw that video of him, with Newbury, with his team, and they're somewhere, and there's thousands of people singing the songs that he wrote. He's holding the guitar, and man, something just happened, bro. I was just like, man, like, that's the coolest thing ever. And my uncle had bought me my first guitar, and I
Yeah.
so long ago. And then my uncle would, he would work on our house like all the time. Like, they bought a fixer upper house, and like pretty much my whole upbringing, like, he was fixing the house all the time. He'd go to work
Yeah.
at work, and then come home and work on the house. And he would watch different things like rooms whenever he's working. So like, he was like, hey, come here. He told me to come here. I walked into this room, and he had this video of this acoustic moment uh, at a Prince concert. He was a huge Prince fan back in the day, and Prince is sitting there with an acoustic Taylor acoustic guitar. I remember the guitar was purple, and he's sitting there with the crowd, and he's just playing his songs, and the crowd singing back to him. And and he just looks at that. He's like, Draylin, don't you want to be able to do that one day? Like, to be able to, just have a guitar and just lead a group of people. And it's actually really cool on this last recording that I just did, on my second record. Um, I had a man, I could get emotional thinking about it. I had a part in the night of, where it was just me and an acoustic, and I mean, it wasn't thousands of people, but um, there were probably about 600 people, 600 or 700 people there, and I started singing these songs that the Lord gave me on my previous record. And it was just so amazing to hear the people sing these songs that I was in my room by myself playing acoustic guitar, and, you know, hearing them sing these
That's
songs, and
cool.
they're worshiping, and they're, singing Have Your Way, and they're singing Better Than Good, and they're singing Power in the Name. And it was like that moment went back to that little kid in Dallas nobody knew, saw a video of Israel, and my uncle saying, "Man,
That's
one
cool,
one
man.
day you're going to be able to do that." And
That's
it's
cool.
just it's just my life changed, bro, because of music, and
Yeah.
because God had a plan for my life, and He just put people in my life
Yeah.
to steward that calling. So I'm just
Yeah.
grateful, man.
That's awesome, man. I love hearing your story. Let me flip it with this a little bit.
Okay.
So you have this desire, you start pursuing this desire, you're singing at North Cities a lot, you get accepted into IBC, you start singing there.
Yeah.
Even after that, you continue singing. You're married at this point. And did you ever think, when you first started pursuing this after you're married, do you ever have the thought that if I have kids, it's going to take me away from what I'm doing?
No, I never thought that. The dream for me was always having that as well, like all of those things. My uncle, or my
Mm,
my my pastor now, his name's Harold Hoffman, and the dream for the longest time for me was, you know, I thought doing records was like never gonna happen for me, like doing a live recording where people all over the country are singing your song. Like, I was like, that's
yeah.
never gonna happen for me. Like, so I was like, you know what? Like, man, what would be really cool is if I could become a worship pastor at a church, and, you know, be able to help people lead worship with my wife and get me married and we have kids and like that'd be the thing. Cause I always wanted to just work at a church, man. I mean, like, you know, spending so much time at North Cities, uh, just I just wanted to be in the church. I didn't care if I was cleaning toilets for a living. I didn't care if I was, I looked at our ministry team as like, bro, like that's the coolest thing ever. Like they just get to worry about the kingdom of God and they get to, that was the thing. I like the dream for me was to be able to have a family and work at the church, and
Mm.
and by the time I was 22, I was married, and um, you know, I was a worship pastor at a church, and then I was a part of a church launch where I was a worship pastor at two churches, and we were recording, and then my wife told me that she was pregnant, and and by the time I was 25, I had my first son, had our first kid, and
Yeah.
we were like everything on my list had been checked off, and I remember my pastor
Yeah.
saying, Draylin, all you wanted to do was work at the church and be married and have a family and all these things. And he said, well, God made that happen before, you were 40 years old. You're only 24, 25 years old. And he said, God made the dream, for you. And he said, now it's
Yeah.
time to dream a new dream. And,
Yeah.
and, and he said, well, he's like, what do you feel like the part is still a part of the dream? I said, I'd love to do a live recording. I'd love to, write these songs and get these songs out and hopefully see if people would want to sing them. And he said, well, let's do it, and I was about 26, I think 26 when um, I recorded my first full album. I'll be 30 in May, so that was, just a little under 4 years ago. And we did our first record here, recorded it here. Um, so, you know, it was just always a part of it was everything was there, like it's the family. It's like we
Yeah.
do this together. I
That's
never
cool.
really thought that like, oh, they're gonna hold me back or whatever. And it's so cool that, that they don't now. I would be lying if I said it's not hard. I mean, it's very difficult. Um, you know, it's very difficult to try to figure out. Like, we're going to London next week, and the person that's asking us to come is like, "Hey, Drew, we want you to come." I said, "Okay, well, I can't be away from my family for 10 days, to go to chase some dream, and I'm at the place where I'm like, bro, like that stuff is great. I love that stuff. I would love to do that, but it's like, dude, like I'm okay if I don't, what I mean? Like I'm okay if that doesn't happen,
Yeah.
like this is what I'm excited about. I'm excited about watching my son go beat the drums in our at our
Yeah.
church, and my daughter jump up and down and praise, and my son stand in front of a mic and have a guitar in his hand acting like he's dad. That
Yeah.
stuff to me is way more important, and you only get those things by bringing them with you. You only get those
Yeah.
experiences by them seeing what you're doing. It's just a part of what we do. My
Yeah.
son takes drumsticks everywhere he goes. You know what I'm saying? Like everywhere we are, he has a pair of drumsticks. And so I've been fortunate enough, and that's why it matters who you marry. Um, to have a family that is all bought into the same thing, to the vision that God has for us as a family, not just dad. He's
Yeah.
not gonna call he's not gonna call a dad to come pastor a church. Like, no, it's the family. It's you, his wife, the
Right.
kids. Like, you guys are all a part of this. This is your calling. Um,
I think it's notable wisdom on your part, though, that the dream wasn't just what you exclusively wanted to do by yourself, but it had a little longevity attached to it,
yeah,
knowing that as life continues on, there's going to be a wife and there's going to be
yeah,
kids. But for you, like they were always a part of big
yeah,
picture. And I think a lot of guys miss that because they see the career, they see the potential promotions, they see their entrepreneurial
yeah,
pursuits, and they think, man, like, dude, like this is happening. And anything else that gets in the way is going to be a hindrance. But I think it's wise that for you, family was always a part of that because oftentimes people miss that And then they have to have that reality check of, if I'm going to live this dream, if I'm going to have this success, who's it going to be for?
Yeah.
Like, if I don't have a wife and a kid and kids to share it with, then what's the point? It doesn't do anything if I'm the only one who reaps the benefits of
Right.
it. So I think that's really cool. Can you talk about some of the ways that like you involve your kids in what you're doing, since this is a big family dream for you?
Yeah.
I know you mentioned like your daughter, jumping up and participating, your son trying to impersonate you on the guitar. He's probably already better, but can
Yes.
you talk about, just some of the things that you do? And I know you mentioned earlier, like if they can't go with you, it's almost a make it or break it deal, but
Yeah.
what are some things that you do to keep them involved?
We just, it's like when you're all in on something, like there's it's everything's together. You know what I'm saying? Like mom and dad are worship pastors at church. Like that's their job. That's their livelihood. That's they write songs. They do everything we do is for the kingdom of God, bro. You know what I mean? So it's like,
Yep.
the music, like the music we play at the house, like the stuff that we have, like, you know, everything is inclusive. So like right now we have a pastoral meeting and like our kids are young. So like we're not going to dump them off to some, you know, uh, care, like just, children's care.
Yeah.
Like, no, like, my wife is a stay-at-home mom, and she takes care of the kids, and we take them to their doctor's appointment. When we travel, they come with us. Like we go to meetings at the church, they come with us. We go to prayer tonight, they come with us. We have practice on Thursday night, they come with us. And if whenever we're
Yeah.
traveling, like what I mean. So like it's just a point. I learned a long time ago for the best thing you can be the best thing you could possibly be to someone is an example. And like if there's anything, I want my kids to see what we're doing. And those are the stories that they're going to tell. They're going to remember being at the church wee hours of the night and locking up and the funny thing is this is his favorite place. Like this is his favorite place ever.
That's cool.
Like he loves Chipotle, he loves Wendy's, he loves Chick-fil-A, he loves mom and dad's house. He loves Grammy and Poppy's house. And he loves the church, bro. He just wants to be here playing the drums and he wants to preach. He wants to
Yeah.
hold the microphone and act like he's preaching and doing the video announcements. And when we're at home, he gets on YouTube and watches our live stream, services and reenacts the prayers and reenacts the songs. Like, it's just honestly the best way, to keep them a part of it is to just keep them a part of it. Let them be
Yeah.
around it. I never yank them off the drums and say, no, you don't know what you're doing. Like you can't. Like no, man, let them play the drums. Like let them
That's
let them
good.
play the guitar. Let them grab the microphone. And we had go to a great church where they believe in kids. Just
Yeah.
doing a ton of stuff. So it's a blessing, man, just to have
So you
what
are
we
just
have.
living life and living the dream
That's it.
as a family.
It's
And
just
that's
it's
really
just what we
cool.
do.
Let me ask you this. You talked about, the best thing that you can be to someone is an example, including your kids and everything, letting them be a part of everything that you're doing to where, they love the church as much as they do. What do you hope to accomplish in including them at the capacity that you do?
I heard a TED talk with Victor Wooten, which is like this one of the, if you know who like bass players are, he's like the
Yeah.
godfather of bass, and he's just
Yes.
amazing and incredible. Not just an incredible musician, but an incredible teacher. I've watched so many different, talks that he's had, and just how he talks about life. But one of the cool things I really love that he shared at a TED talk was that music is a language. Music is a language that you learn. How to communicate, just like you learn your ABCs and your one, two, threes in English, and you're learning all that stuff, and you're learning, all these different prefixes, and you learn verbs and nouns and pronouns and adjectives and all this stuff. And then you learn how to put words together. And then before long, you're reading sentences, and then you're reading books, and then you're having conversations like we are now, to where we're able to know which one of us is what we're saying and what we're talking about to be able to carry on a conversation. And it all started by you saying, blah, 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 you know? It all started by you just being around mom and dad talking and being around other people speaking. And by the time you're 25, hopefully, you can have a decent conversation. And
Right.
music is the same thing, you know. If my son is playing bass or playing guitar, I'm not going to sit there and say, "No, son, play it like this." And it's like, just let them be around it. Let them come up to it. Don't try to instruct them at the beginning. Let them get so in love with just being around it that they're going to want to figure out, you know, how it works and how does it sound like this? How do you just letting people be around. It's the same thing that happens, when you're trying to disciple people. Like, man, you just let people be around peace and joy and love, and they're gonna want to know how the thing works. And
Yeah.
it's the same thing I'm hoping with my kids is I'm just trying to keep them as close to the presence of God, the things of God, the calling,
Yeah.
and God will ultimately lead them where they're supposed to go.
Sounds like you're just being a disciple who's trying to raise other little disciples.
100%. 100%.
Yeah, that's awesome. Awesome. That's what we're supposed to be doing as Christian fathers. And so I commend you on that. Way to go, buddy. I'm proud of
Thank
you.
you, man.
I might say that a little bit more, but I'm going to ask you one more thing. I know you got to go and I got to get kiddos too,
Yes.
but let me ask you one more thing and then I'll have you share all your accolades, how people can find you because you're,
Yeah.
big time now. But let me ask you this. So with all of your experience, right, growing up the way that you grew up, and a little bit of a different upbringing than I'm going to say the majority, in how you've traveled and how you go about life, with your essential three full-time jobs, wife, two kids. What's the best advice or the best piece of advice that you would give to other dads?
To other dads, I would say, somebody told me, a good friend of mine told me, if you can just look inside your kid's eyes for 30 minutes every day, just 30 minutes. 30 minutes is a lifetime to them, especially when they're in those forming ages of, you know, infants up until about 4 or 5. My son is 4, he'll be 5
Yep.
this year. And and we have a close relationship to where, now he doesn't communicate the best right now, but I know exactly what he means whenever he says stuff.
Right.
And just being
Yep.
able to, that's one thing I wish I would have done is just 30 minutes of just roughhousing or, spending time playing basketball. One of the things he loves basketball. We put a goal on the back of his door, and like every night he wants to shoot and he wants to, just have fun and play drums. And now he's wanting me to play with him. Before it was just him playing. Like now it's like, no, Dad, I want you to play the guitar while I play the drums.
That's awesome.
And just having that, and sometimes I have to really train my mind to just, okay, stop doing what you do. This is way more important.
Yeah.
Have those moments with him, and then I'm developing that with my daughter. She's super small, but trying to have that close knit relationship, with her and with my son, and um, but I would say that 30 minutes goes a long ways if you can do that every day,
Yeah.
man. Just 30 minutes. Look in their eyes, man. Play
Yeah.
with them, spend time, talk to them. And then the other thing is, uh, the Bible says we have to endeavor to keep the unity of the Spirit. And man, be at one with your wife, be at one with your kids, protect your family. If you don't protect them, you're leaving it up to mom to protect, you know, the family, and moms will, but that's not their job, man. Their job is to nourish, and something can't be protected and nourished at the same time by one person. Um, that's why dad is there to protect them with a home and protect them with, finances to be able to have a home so that we can nourish the children and nourish this relationship in home. But be at one with your wife and your kids, and make sure that relationship between you and your wife is so strong. Make sure that communication is so strong, because worse than kids ever seeing your parents fight or disagree and backbite one another, and be at one with your pastor. Be in communication with have a pastor. If you're going to be a father, you're the priest of your home. And the worst thing in the world is a priest that's not submitted. The worst thing in the world is a man that doesn't have a leader, that doesn't have a pastor, that doesn't have somebody that can look you in your face and say, no, you're wrong. You need to fix that. You need to not do that. If you don't have those things, man, those things have saved my life. Those things have given me everything that I have and taken away the things that I shouldn't. And so if I could give any advice to any father, have those three very vital relationships where you're with your kids and they're looking up to you, that oneness with your wife, that closeness, and then you have somebody that's above you that you're accountable to, that you can tell your faults to, and that can help you be a better father and a better husband. So
it's sound advice, man. Thank you for sharing that. That's things we all need to work on, things that we all need to be mindful of as we go down this journey of fatherhood. All right, I'm going to give you some time. Tell people how they can find you, man. Tell them about your albums, how they can support you, all that good stuff.
You can, I do most of the stuff on Instagram. That's probably my biggest platform. It's just Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, anything, anywhere music is sold, you just type in my name, and I hope that it blesses you. And, that's pretty much it, man. There's not much to it. So.
All right, check it out. You're Draylin Young Music on social?
Yes.
Is that it?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Draylin Young Music on social, Draylin Young, iTunes, they can find
anything.
You got 2 live recordings, and then you're featured on way too many other songs.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Don't tell them that, so.
Yeah. Yeah, they keep having me back. Yeah. Well, good, man. Good. All right. Well, I'm proud of you, buddy. And I appreciate you taking the time to share your story. You shared more than I thought you would, and I appreciate that. I think so much of what you went through, it helps. I mean, granted, I didn't live the same life that you lived, but learning about your perspective, seeing your commitment through the stuff that you endured, like that's motivational, that's inspirational, and I think it's going to help a whole lot of dads. So thanks, buddy, for being with me. I appreciate it a lot.
Thank you for having me, bro. I appreciate what you're doing as well, man. Thank you so much for this.
Well, there you have it. What an incredible story about an incredible friend of mine, Draylin Young. I'm so happy that he joined me today to share his testimony and his upbringing and the journey that God has taken him through. He shared a lot of good points, but the main thing that I want you to take away is his perspective on the dream. It's so easy for so many of us to have our passions and our dreams and our ambitions and to want to pursue those things, but we do a very unwise thing with our dreams sometimes, and that is not including the people who matter the most to us in our life. Make sure that you take this from Draylin. Make sure that you reform your dream and your ambition to include the people who matter the most to you. Make sure your wife, your kids, and your family are a part of your dream, and it will make the dream that much better. Thank you so much for being with me. This is Father in Our Future, the podcast for dads. I'm Anthony Vandegrift, and I hope you'll join me next time. Hey, I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Also, don't be shy. Please connect with Father in Our Future on social media and become a part of the community that values fathers, that aims to help men love being dads and to help dads be better dads every day so that together we can better father our future.